Welcome to Basic History, where today we'll be discussing the year 1918 in my World War I series. As always, let's start with a little recap. 1917 had been a bit of a disaster for the Allies. Russia had left the war and was currently discussing peace terms with the Central Powers. Italy had been smashed at Caporetto and had only been saved by the arrival of British and French divisions. The French armies on the Western Front had mutinied. The British had managed some minor gains in the West and Middle East, but overall it had been a pretty dismal year. But Central Powers were also suffering. The Royal Navy blockade was starving Germany. Austria-Hungary was on the brink of collapse, and the Bulgarians were overstretched, holding the Allies in the Balkans. And with American troops and material landing in France in ever greater numbers, German General Ludendorff decided to bet the house on one last gamble. Step 1 of this plan was the signing of a peace treaty between Germany and Russia at Brest-Litovsk on the 3rd of March. The newly proclaimed Soviet Union under Lenin gave up massive amounts of territory in return for peace, freeing up 500,000 German soldiers who quickly headed west. With these reinforcements in place, on the 21st of March, Germany launched its massive spring offensive, starting with Operation Michael, aimed at the British Fifth Army, and it was a stunning success, driving the British back over 30 miles, almost routing the Fifth Army and nearly splitting French and British lines. Michael was only to be stopped by Canadian and Australian troops, who once again proved their martial skills. In response to this, Ferdinand Foch was made Supreme Allied Commander to maintain a unified command. After Michael came Georgette in April, where German troops tried to capture Ypres and then drive on to the Channel ports. Despite penetrating 9 miles into the British lines, they would fail to capture the Ypres salient. The Germans then pivoted to the French, launching Blucher-Joch in late April after Georgette failed, and then following this up with Gneisenau. This would be the first time the Americans fought, as the 1st and 2nd Divisions took their place in Allied lines. The French would be pushed back to the Marne, but ultimately they would hold, and by the 18th of July it was over. The German gamble had failed, and they had suffered over 600,000 casualties, and its troops were exhausted, hungry, and completely demoralized. The Allies would immediately begin planning a counterattack. On the 15th of June, Austria-Hungary attacked the Italians on the Piave River in support of Germany's spring offensive. This offensive failed miserably, as the Austrians failed to advance and took over 100,000 casualties. This effectively ended the Austro-Hungarian army as a fighting force, and the Italians, just like their allies to the north, began planning their counterattack. On the 8th of August, the Allies attacked on the Western Front, starting the so-called 100 Days Offensive. They smashed through German lines, capturing tens of thousands of prisoners, and after 4 years, trench warfare was over, as the Allies fought a war of manoeuvre against retreating and crumbling German forces. In the Balkans, on the 15th of September, Allied forces launched the Vardas campaign, and the Bulgarian lines collapsed, ending the stalemate of the Macedonian front, and on the 29th of September, the Armistice of Salonika was signed, as Bulgaria left the war. In the Middle East, Britain had pushed steadily north, until King Faisal led his troops into Damascus on the 1st of October, and then captured Aleppo on the 25th. The Ottomans would consequently sign the Armistice of Mudros 5 days later. And on October 24th, the Battle of Vinterio Veneto began in Italy. This attack lasted until the 4th of November, as Austria-Hungary signed an armistice in a doomed attempt to keep its collapsing empire together. The Italian front was closed. Meanwhile, in Germany, the High Seas Fleet was ordered on a suicidal attack. Instead, the sailors mutinied on November 3rd, sparking waves of protest and rebellion across Germany. culminating in the abdication of the Kaiser on the 9th and the formation of a German Republic. And finally, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Germany signed an armistice, and the guns of World War I fell silent 4 years and 106 days after it had begun. The peace would be formalised with the Treaty of Versailles, a controversial treaty that put the blame of the war on Germany, forced it to give up all its overseas possessions, pay massive war reparations, and demilitarise its army. It would prove very unpopular in Germany and sow the seeds of future conflict. An independent Poland was formed, along with Yugoslavia, Austria, Hungary, a greater Romania, and Czechoslovakia, all from the fallen Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Middle East was reformed as the Ottomans collapsed and the British and French moved in to replace them. Russia was in the midst of a bloody and brutal civil war that would in time lead to the Soviet Union towering over Eastern Europe. Japan gained German colonies in China, much to China's anger. The League of Nations was formed in an attempt to prevent such a devastating war from ever happening again. Between 15 and 22 million people had died, both military and civilian. Much of Europe was devastated, and the world had changed, with new superpowers rising in the East and the West. This has been the First World War by Basic History. Thanks for watching. Oh, also, von Letter Vorbeck only surrendered 4 days after the rest of the German armies, after having tied down over 250,000 Allied troops and never been defeated, and remaining one of the greatest guerrilla commanders of all time. So, hell yeah, von Letter Vorbeck. Awesome dude.